Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic for you today. Let's do it. Creepiest or unexplained experiences, glitch in the matrix, or other. Please remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, hype, listen and ask for shoutouts, and say hello to Batman. My childhood home was massively haunted. A lot of the haunting happened during the day, but here's the one that panicked me the most. I was alone watching my brother. I was around 18. He was 2 or 3, barely talking yet. We were in his playroom, a really brightly lit area downstairs, playing with blocks or something, when he suddenly goes from giggling and running around to just dead frozen, staring at the entryway into the room. I ask him what's up, and he just points to our staircase and says, "Icky noise." He'd been pointing and saying that he freaked out randomly for a while now, and I figured it was going to be another time, showing him nothing is there. But I finally take a good look at the stairs, and there's something there. Our staircase was mostly surrounded by walls, so I hadn't noticed at first due to the shadow, but I could see crouched on the step just below where the wall cut off this pitch-black shape of a person. It was literally a slightly fuzzy silhouette of a person made of just pure black, clearly looking at us between the hand railing. It took a step further down toward us, still crouched, holding the rails, before my brain processed that I was actually seeing it. I screamed because what other response are you really going to have to that? Grabbed my brother and hauled ass out of the house. We ended up sitting in the backyard, playing with my sister's dog while I called my mom and waited for her to get home. Sightings of that thing only got worse before we moved out. When my brother was a bit older, he was able to explain. He called it icky noise because whenever it showed up, he could hear this really gross, scary, gurgling whispering. I never heard it make noise, but I definitely saw it several times, and it got rid of my idea the daytime was absolutely safe real fast. Till this day, when I tell people about my breathing doll, they don't believe me. They just say it was me or my vivid imagination, but my doll breathing was real, and it was one of the most vivid memories of my childhood, especially with unexplained experiences. I first saw the doll at a flea market. I was with my mom and grandmother and fell in love with it. It was a big doll, about 14 inches. The only picture I could find was this one under famous dolls, and it looked just like that one. After begging my mom to buy it and failing, my grandma bought it for me. Man, I loved that doll like it was a real baby. I bought it baby clothes, shoes, bottles, and the such. Took him everywhere. I named him Rocky. People often thought I was holding my baby brother. Well, one day, I was outside playing with Rocky and I was being a little too rough with him, throwing him up in the air and letting him fall repeatedly, scolding him when he wouldn't sit still on my bike. So I got him and threw him as high as I could and tried to catch him, but he slipped through my hands and hit the ground. I picked him up to dust him off, and that's when I heard him breathing. It was heavy and angry and fast, just like someone would sound when they're really pissed. I throw him on the ground and stare at him shaking, terrified. I leave him on the ground and run inside. My mom asks what's wrong and I tell her what happened. She laughs it off as if it was nothing and says I'm being silly and to go and pick him up and bring him inside. I refused to touch him and screamed when she tried to force me. She gave up and picked him up and looked at him and said, "See, he's just a doll, stuffing in plastic. He's not real, he can't breathe." That was the last day I ever played with dolls. I gave him to my brother for a home economics project he had, where you carry around a bag of flour and pretend it's a baby or some shit. Anyways, he used its head and attached it to the bag of flour to make it more babyish. He ended up getting extra credit for that. A few years later, the whole Chucky, Crazy, and killer doll movies were all the rage. All the while, I had a real demon on my own. I'm pretty sure that people who go camping a lot will agree with me that a forest at night is a pretty creepy place. Lots of sounds you couldn't connect to any animal. I usually dismiss them as wind or weird echoes, but about 5 years ago I went camping in the southern Alps, and I set my tent just inside the tree line. After about 2 days of being there and exploring the nature, hiking and doing a bit of caving, I started to feel like something was around me. Not like following me, but that something was all around. I thought I was just tired and dehydrated, but when the night fell on the third day and I was lying in my tent, I started to hear branches breaking and leaves moving really unnaturally. It's quite common for branches to break under their own weight or because they were rotten, but when I woke up and checked the trees, there were marks on them at about 15 feet high. Not just one tree, but a lot of them. On the 5 trees around my tent, there was also scratching at the same height. I was pretty scared at that point because I had no idea if some local was playing a prank on me or there was something more sinister going on. I had a knife to defend myself, but I quickly checked the trees and floor for the last time, and there were no footprints or any disturbed foliage, which meant that what came on trees didn't touch the ground even once. After I started heading back to the valley, I heard this noise like a deer mixed with a man's voice. It was so creepy. I legit started running downhill. I don't look like, and I don't look back once, and even though I'm not religious, I grasped the crucifix that Grandma gave me so hard, and my palm started to bleed. You have no idea how shitty and up the whole situation was, and the worst thing of all is no one believed me. After asking the locals if there were people living up there was even anything shady going on, they ignored me and started to avoid eye contact. I was an adolescent and went into the woods with a neighborhood friend to investigate the old house. It stood in the middle of an otherwise completely wooded area and was connected to the rest of us only by a poorly kept service road. When we got there, we discovered that the house also had what looked like a one-room school on the property. Through age-glazed windows, we could see the broken chalkboard and rotting desks the kids once used. The schoolhouse had a cellar that opened via large doors chained over. We tried pulling on the handles to see if we could somehow open them, but gave up. After a while, we landed on just planning some general vandalism, but then it happened. Those damn cellar doors exploded open, throwing the chain aside, paused at the apex of their opening, and slammed shut, seemingly faster than they had opened. Yep, I shit myself. He and I took off running through the woods. Once we emerged in the neighborhood, trembling and scratched by seemingly every tree and bush we paused, we stood staring at each other and alternately the woods. Nothing happened afterwards, so we made our way to each of our homes and just agreed to not talk about it. 20 years later, we caught up via phone and I tried to ask, but before I could get it out, he said, "Yep, I remember. No, I don't ever think about it, and I have no explanation. Let's not revisit." And so it stands, the most unexplainable thing I've ever seen. When I was around 8 to 12 years old, I would always bike down to the park with my 3 close buddies after dinner to play some sports or just chill out on the playground. My friends and I all lived very close together on the top of a hill with only a few houses between us. The park was about 7 blocks down the hill, and we would usually meet up at one person's place and bike down to the park together. Normally, walking to the park would take about 12 to 15 minutes, but when we ride downhill on the bike, we get there in about 2 to 3 minutes at most. So this one month, my friend's grandmother was visiting from out of town. She had a small figure and was almost 70 years old, but still had this lively aura about her. She could walk over, but usually used her cane when we went outdoors. Sometimes when we went to the park, she would join us a little later and just take a stroll admiring flowers or picking up vegetation. I think she uses them for some sort of ointment or occasionally in food prep. I never bothered asking. Nothing unusual so far. Then, on a sunny evening around 7 p.m., the sun sets late in the summer, we all met up at my friend's house with bikes and were about to ride off to the park. His grandma peeks out from inside the house and shouts to us to be careful when riding on the road. She was still doing the dishes, and she told us she would come to the park later. We didn't really give it any second thought and just started riding down to the park. We sped down the hill that day and got to the park in about a minute and a half flat. We were all adrenaline rushed because we don't normally go that fast, but just wanted to see how fast we could make it there. Pretty dangerous, do not attempt. Before we could catch our breath, we looked over to the playground of the park, and all of us were just stunned. My friend's grandma was there, standing by the edge of the playground with her cane in one hand and waving to us with the other. We rode over to her and were about to ask how she got down so fast when she asked, "What took you guys so long?" We all looked at each other for a solid 5 seconds speechless before my other friend said, "Holy dude, your grandma can teleport." Hi. I'm not going to be one of those new dog dads that just constantly show pictures or videos of him, but he just curled up and fell asleep while I was reading, and I don't know, just wanted to show you guys, I guess, a little behind the scenes. So that man is asleep below me, adjusting very well. The kids, my mom who is visiting, are all enjoying him very much. So things are going well over here, and I hope everything is going well for you guys out there. Have a wonderful day, and if you are curious about this rescue group that we use, we'd be happy to share the info. So any questions, comments, or concerns, reach out. Otherwise, be great, and I'll see you tomorrow. More creepy and unexplainable than anything else, whenever I tell this story, it's phrased as the time I met a CIA agent. I used to work retail and had been opening that morning. This was at around 7 a.m., so not many people were out and about. I opened the doors at 7:30. At 7:35, a man comes in. He looks frantic. His clothes don't look very well kept. I sort of assumed he was homeless. This sent me a bit on edge, and I honestly thought I was about to get robbed. He comes up to the counter, looks around, and then asks where the bathroom is. At this point, I just assumed that he wanted to shoot up or something. Whatever. Not the first, not the last, and I make it a general rule not to piss off junkies before 10 a.m. So I point him toward the bathroom and go about my day. He heads in the bathroom, and a few minutes later, 2 men come into the store. They look around, then at me, then towards a car just outside. They don't really say anything to me once, other than a general "hey," before starting to look around. Usually, we never get customers that early in the morning. We often start getting customers at around 8 a.m. and business picks up around 9 a.m. One of them heads to the bathroom. He tries to open it, and it's locked. I say nothing. They didn't ask me why it was locked or anything. I'm not opening my mouth because, once again, it's before 10 a.m. The 2 of them leave. The guy comes out shortly after. He's dressed in much better clothes, looks somewhat groomed, and even seems to have a better posture. He just nods over to me and walks out. I've thought this over at least once a day in the 4 years since I had that job. It wasn't until the next day that things really stood out to me as being really fucking weird. My conclusion is that I watched some sort of spy operation or something, because honestly, that's what it felt like. If these things ever have feelings, that is. As someone who doesn't believe in ghosts, this one continues to baffle me to this day. The old Presque Isle Lighthouse in Michigan. It was deactivated in the 1800s, and the story goes that one day, despite the fact that no power had been provided to it, it began to turn back on every night. I believe that it has even now been re-registered as a landmark for passing ships, so that they know where they are and when visibility is low. But wait, it gets weirder. I saw this lighthouse turn on with my very eyes, standing on a bridge about a mile away. I looked through a pair of binoculars and saw the filament itself burning. You could clearly make out a shape of it. It was exactly like looking into a low-watt bulb. However, when my friend and I hiked along the coast and made our way to the foot of the thing, it was very clearly still off. No light was coming on from the inside, but we had another person on the bridge. His very sweet grandma had a walkie-talkie, and she swore up and down that it was still on, even provided pictures. To re-illustrate, I was up close at an angle where I could see that the thing was giving off zero light, as the sun had all but gone down completely, while someone else was able to take pictures of the bulb still burning clear as day. Upon hiking back, the bulb became brighter and brighter the further away we got, until it was at its full glory when we went back to the bridge and the sun was completely down. Again, I don't believe in ghosts, but as someone who likes poking holes in stories like these, I do not understand how this could have possibly worked. Back when I was 15 in the 90s, we used to hang out in the small woods we called the orchard. It used to be one, but was now abandoned land. It was tiny, essentially a 10-meter wide by 15-meter long crop of trees and grass. It was kind of pathetic in retrospect, but served as a cool little place to meet up for kids in our village. It was quite common during the summer holidays for a group of 7 of us to just sit there and chat and do things. Surrounded by the orchard, there was a visible open field from one side of another and a residential estate on the other. One day our group of 7 kids between 11 and 15 were all hanging out by a fence that cut across the entrance to the orchard. This fence went about 2 meters into the woods from the open field, so we basically had the fence, then us, then a small amount of trees, and then open field. Nothing special was going on, and it was a hot summer's day. We were just talking about video games when we started hearing noises. Short, sharp impacts. Something sounds like it's hitting the trees. This happens once or twice and then calms down when we start paying attention. It stops, and we carry on talking, thinking nothing of it. Then it starts again. Again, short, sharp sounds like something is crashing against the trees. Always a few seconds apart, but with no real rhythm to them. Again, it goes quiet when we start paying attention, then we see one, a small stone. It bounces off the top of one of the trees and falls down beside us. The 7 of us just stared at dumbfounded. At first, we're convinced that it's another group of kids waging war with us because that's the age and mentality where we're at the time. So we rush onto the field to defend ourselves, but there's no one there. The field is open enough that it's clear no one could really be hiding anywhere. The trees are open enough as it is, so we can see most of the field by the fence. There's definitely no one there. We go back to the fence and carry on watching and talking. The stones aren't big enough to hurt if they did hit us. They'd just mildly annoy if anything. It's more just interesting at this point. Another few more just interesting happen, and we start to find and collect them as they land. We get about 8 of them, and we can hear others. Then, with no warning, a large stone about the size of a cup comes crashing down between me and my friend and smacks into the fence, rebounding off it and rolling to the floor. Even at that age, we understand that if this had hit us, it would have been bad. The rock is heavy to pick up, and I remember holding it for a few moments. I had to wrap my hand around the rock to not do so. At that point, we had reached our limit for the day. We left that area via the open field, partly determined to find out who was throwing the rocks and partly just out of there. To this day, 20 years later, I still don't know what was going on. The obvious answer is that some idiot was just throwing them at us, but we couldn't see anyone in the field, and there was no other angle for them to throw them at us. At the time, we played with the idea that someone was throwing them from the other side of the fence, and they were rebounding off the trees. But we could get to the other side of the fence, and the rest of the orchard there was just an open with no one in sight. While the light stones could be thrown far, that one big heavy rock was heavy enough that you'd have to be pretty close to throw it even as an adult. Basically, we were able to view the area enough so that no location within the throwing distance of the large rock would be visible. This is pretty much the one unexplained, slightly paranormal event in my life. It happened in the middle of the day, and the obvious explanations don't appear possible. I happily debunked and skeptical about everything else in my life and any other paranormal stories I get told, but this remains the one thing that gives me a little pause. When I was in high school, my dad had a new employee over for a barbecue dinner. We lived in a nice suburban rural area. There was housing plans near our home, but our home wasn't part of them. It had been built by my grandfather just before he passed, long before I was born. So it had a nice backside patio and pool my father had installed. So we were all sitting on the deck at a picnic table. My dad was cooking on the barbecue and had been sitting next to the new hire, so the new hire and his dog were facing the rear door to my house, alone, and my mom and I were on the other side of the table. Suddenly the dog looks at the rear sliding door to my house and lets out a growl. My mother and I look at the dog and then the new hire. Call him Andy. Andy says, "Lennox, Hanja, Mom, don't move. Just act normal. Is there anyone else home?" under his breath. He's wearing sunglasses, and he's looking at the sliding glass door out of the corner of his eye. "I'm going to get up in a minute and go to my car. I have a car phone." Yes, this was long ago. "And I'm going to call the police." My mother asks him to describe the man, and he pretty much says it looks like Lennox Hanja's father, but about 1 foot shorter and wearing an old-style baseball cap. My mother laughs at this and says the sounds just like my grandfather while turning around to look. Andy says the guy just vanished as the mother turned around, and goes on to let him, lots of people have thought my father was home and came to see him and he wasn't, etc. And it's just my grandfather's ghost. Keep in mind, this was our first meeting with Andy, and my father, to this day, has never spoken about his father, even to me. I've learned 100% about him from my relative because my father was away at uni when he died in an accident, and my father, to this day, can't bring himself to talk about it. Andy was also kind of nervous, like new hires' nerves, so doing this for a funny would make zero sense. Anyway, the house was checked because my dad didn't like that, and my dad doesn't believe in that kind of shit, etc. But at the moment, I recalled several older memories from when I was younger. Once I was late to a sports match, and my dad was supposed to come home from work and take me, and he was late. While my mother was helping me put on a uniform, I saw my dad walk up the sidewalk, but he wasn't home. I was absolutely sure I saw him and ran outside, but he wasn't there. Came about 10 minutes later, and when I was even younger, I was playing out by our shed, and a neighbor came over and yelled at my mom, "Stop lying, I need to talk to Linux Hanya's dad." And I just saw him walking up your front sidewalk steps in the house. I remember my mom crying and saying he really wasn't there, and the neighbor puffed off. Anyway, those were all at the daytime. A few things happened around my house later when I was older and back from uni, but that was at night, lol. Rented a house that was built in the early 1800s. It was in a small coastal town in Maryland where everyone knew everyone except me and my roommate. We just moved in. The landlord was in his mid-70s. He and his wife had just purchased the home a few years earlier as an investment. We were the first tenants for them as they were fixing it up due to it failing into disrepair over the years. We were in the home a few weeks when it became apparent that the locals always asked, "So, you like living there?" It seemed odd because it was a nice corner lot, well landscaped with an up-to-date kitchen and renovations, a private backyard with wrought iron fencing around the front, and very picturesque. The front of the home had old mortar walls and very old, distressed yet finished wood floors. The middle of the home was actually an addition built around 1950, and the final addition, a large family room and bathroom, was built in 1981. On the second floor were the 3 bedrooms, one in each section of the house, with a staircase that started in the kitchen middle section, first floor, and led to the first bedroom in the front section of the house on the second floor. Only one neighbor was actually friendly to us, a woman in her early 50s, a widow, and she lived alone. We asked why everyone was asking if we like living there. She said matter-of-factly, "It's been abandoned for years. Things happen there, no one wants to live there." We were like, "What the f-?" I asked what happened, and she said back when she was little, a boy with mental and physical issues died in the house. Families lived there off and on until the mid-80s, and then it was left unoccupied. The thing is, nobody stayed there long. They all seemed to just move out after a few months, maybe a year at the most. We were the first since the early 80s, and this was around 96. We never noticed anything, mostly because we were never home, working during the day and then going out at night. We weren't homebodies hanging out. Then it was about 6 to 7 months living there. My roommate came into my bedroom late one night and asked if I had woken up. He said I was sleepwalking and stood in his doorway. I was never asleep. I was reading a book. Our rooms were at each other's end of the house. His at the front, mine at the back. I asked, "What did you see?" He said it was a shadow of someone in his doorway, and it backed away when he addressed it, thinking it was me. We both freaked. We searched the house, and every door was still locked from the inside. We searched everywhere. Windows, too, all locked shut. I blew it off as he was just seeing things. He did as well. A week or so later, I was getting ready for work. It was 7 a.m. when there was a knocking on my bedroom door. Incessant, loud, aggressive knocking. Banging, actually. I was pissed. What the Open the fucking door. The banging continued as I was approaching the door, cussing at what I thought was my roommate. As soon as I grabbed the doorknob and opened the door, the banging stopped and no one was there. I mean, within a second, this happened 2 or more times to me that same week. both in the morning, my roommate saw the shadow person one more time, but this time it was in the doorway of the third edition of the house. He saw a black shadow move through the kitchen to the back part of the house and just dissipate. We continued and contacted the landlord, but he knew nothing and honestly didn't seem to care. We spoke to the woman across the street and told her what was happening, and she said a family once before had similar complaints about banging on the walls and doors, but also someone or something grabbing their kids and actually leaving bruises. Everyone thought it was possibly child abuse, but the family moved out rather quickly. We get a notice in the mail after living there about 8 months that the landlord passed away and his son is selling the property. We need to move out ASAP. He sent our security deposit and first month's rent back to compensate us for the short notice. My only paranormal experience in my life.